So types of custom orders. I think where a lot of people get hung up on this is they think there's a zillion types of orders and there's not.
Mm-hmm.
Only order I can receive as a broker is a market order where the customer tells me he wants immediate execution at the best available price. I told you that I've moved here off grid and I'm hanging out with a community that is much different than me. I'm a city guy, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm buying things, they don't understand a market order. You know, I was buying this generator and I said, I'll take it. And he said, well, I haven't told you what the price is. I said, it doesn't matter. I need a generator. That's the generator I
Yeah.
want. And he goes, well, that's not how it works. You got to get a quote. I go, no. I said, listen, but however you do it, I'm buying the thing. You know, if I was got my airplane canceled, the flight, I'm looking at the screen, it got canceled. I said, listen, I can't be spending the night in this airport. I got to get out of here. I went to the screen, saw where the next flight was. I went to the gauge and I said, hey, I need my butt on that plane.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't even told you what the ticket costs. I go, it doesn't matter what the ticket costs. Whatever the ticket costs to get my butt on that plane, that's what I'm going to give you, assuming there's a
Mm-hmm.
seat available, right? So I'm
Mm-hmm.
more interested in a market order than I am in execution than I am price. Now, limit order is where I say I want to buy the security at my price or less. There's always an implied or better. So if I say buy me 1,000 shares of Apple at 220. By the way, it's my job as a broker to know that's a limit order. Customer specifies a price. That's a limit order. There's an or better. So I call you and say, hey, your limit, you did get a fill at 219. You'd be a happy camper, right? So as a buyer, your price or less. As a seller, your price or more. Now, it makes sense where we place orders in relationship to the current market price if you think about it. I just told you that, let's assume Apple's at 220, and that's the current market price of Apple. And you say, Dean, buy me 1,000 shares of Apple at 221 or less. I say, well, you must be new. I'm here for you. You want to buy 221 when the stock's at 220? You're filled. I'll buy it at 220. I'll fill you at 221. It beats working for a living. So
Mm-hmm.
it makes sense that you want to place, very testable, no, place your buy limit below the current market price. Now, as a seller, you'd be foolish to tell me that you want to sell Apple for, 218 when it's at 220. I go, really? I'm here
Mm-hmm.
for you. You want to sell it 218 when in the market it's 220? I'll buy it at 218 from you. I'll sell it at 220. Beats working for a living. As a seller, you should place your sell limit above the current market price. We always place orders where we place orders in relationship to
The
the
market.
current market price. The price is guaranteed, but the filling is not. I can't tell you how many times I've had to tell a customer, listen, nobody has to do business with you at your price or better, right? Hey, what's going on with my limit? So the price is guaranteed, the filling is not. So now I'm more interested in price than I am execution. I was going to go to the championship NBA game, and my friend said he'd come with me too. Oh, he said the stadium sold out, and I said, well, Joe, the stadium is never sold out. At some price, there is a ticket, and I don't care about the price. I mean, I'm blessed enough that whatever that ticket costs me, that's what I'm going to do. And
Mm-hmm.
then he said, well, I'll go for $4,000 or less. I said, well, Joe, you may or may not be at the game this evening because you've actually told me that the price is more important to you than the execution. Right. I had to go out and say, hey, listen, nobody's going to sell you the ticket for that. So, either you want to step up or not step up, whatever the case may be. Now, one of the things not so much on our SIE, but if we go on the seven, we should be able to intuit kind of where the market price of this stock is based on the orders we're looking at, because we said it's important to know where we place orders in relationship to the current market price. And so we said we don't have to worry about this as it relates to a market order because, again, market orders are immediate execution at the best available price.
Mm-hmm.
We said sell limits are above the current market price. So we know that the XYZ is somewhere below 35. And if we're looking at a buy limit on 1,030, Well, we know that's below, so we know the market price got to be somewhere in there. I don't know, maybe it's like 33 or 32 or 34, but at some point we should be able to intuit kind of where the market is in relationship to the order we're looking at. Now, as I said, there's only two types of orders, markets and limits. The only order that has no contingency, no qualifier is a market order. But you can add additional qualifiers, additional contingencies to orders. Now, should warn you that the more contingencies or qualifiers you add to an order, the less likely it is to get filled. I used to have a doctor client who drives me nuts. He'd say, Dean, buy 1,000 shares of XYZ at 35, all or none at the close. Yeah, he's got like three or four contingencies in there. And then he said, well, did it go off? I felt like saying, well, what do you think? Now, every once in a while, every one of his contingencies, I say, look at that, Dean. He used to walk around the club, sit down and be like, I put in an order with my broker today, buy 10,000 shares. And I felt like following behind him, go, it ain't going off.
Mm-hmm.
Market order is a broker's favorite order. Now,
So
another
he can
contingency
place
you
it
can add,
anytime.
yeah, another contingency you can add to your order is you can say, hey, I would like to have a suspended order, Dean, a order that becomes live if it trades at or through. Either becomes a live market order or a live limit order. We call those stop orders, and they're called stop orders because the primary use of a stop order is to stop a loss, stop the bleeding.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a baby broker decades ago, I had cold called this guy in this country club several times, and I called him and I said, hey, listen, I'd like you to open a new account with me, and I'd like you to buy 1,000 shares at 40. And if I'm right about this stock over the next 12 to 18 months, I think this could be an $80 stock and you would make $40,000. I said I could just as easily be wrong as right. If I'm wrong, this could be easily a $10 stock, and God knows I wouldn't want you to lose $30,000. So
Mm-hmm.
what I'd like to do with your permission is open the new account, buy 1,000 shares at 40, place a sell stop at 37. So we get stopped out. We stop the bleeding, stop the loss at approximately $3,000. And then he started laughing. He said, honey, there's a broker on the phone says it's going to cost about $3,000 to get to know him. What do you think? I hear her in the background. He says, Dean, I know you're a young man. In those days, I was a young man. He said, Dean, as a young man, one of the most successful parts of investing is letting your flowers bloom, but more important, pulling your weeds. And I love stop orders because it's an automatic weed puller. He said, most brokers like you, Dean, never tell me what it's going to cost me if they're wrong. And I open the new account, I buy 1,000 shares at 40. I don't hear from them. If it goes down, if it goes up, they call me every day asking for referrals. Who do I know they can make rich? If it goes down, they finally call me when it's 20 and they want me to average in down into the dust and buy another 1,000 at 20. He says, I'll tell you what, you open that account, you buy that 1,000 shares at 40, place that sell stop at 37. If that order gets triggered or elected or activated, becomes a mark order and we sell the stock, close the account, send me a check, the relationship is over. Now, that was one of my best days ever as a baby broker because we started getting calls from his buddies in the club, and they said, we'd like to talk to the $3,000 broker. I gave up and said, "Yep, that's me." I opened like six, seven accounts that day.
Yeah.
Now, we got
Relationship.
lucky and the stock did indeed go to 80. And I called him. I said, listen, we don't need to stop the loss anymore. What I'd like to do is protect the profit. I'd like to move that sell stop up to like 78, 77 to protect the profit. Recently my cousin had put his retirement plan online and he is making his wife nervous. She called me and says, Dean, he's playing video arcade games with our retirement money at Schwab. Could you give him a call and see what he's up to? I said, hey, John, you're making your wife nervous. What's up? And he said, Dean, there's this stock that used to be a $40 stock and now it's a $10 stock. I said, well, John, there's probably a reason for that. He said, yeah, I'm thinking about buying 1,000 shares of my retirement plan at 10, goes back to 40, I make $30,000. I say, John, the two major impediments to investment success are taxation and inflation. And in your retirement account, you've already have beat taxation. If you can just beat inflation, you're getting ahead. I would recommend that you make a speculative investment like that in your personal account. That way, if you're wrong, you can deduct up to $3,000.
Mhm.
Geraldine, it's not your damn business, but I don't have the money in my personal account. I said, well, John, probably not a good way to reason to be, doing this in your day trading your pension account. I said, John, while we have been on the phone, I picked up the chart of the stock we're discussing. And it looks like your stock is kind of stuck at 10. It's in a trading range right now. Why would you want to get on board a train that is stuck in the station? You only really want to get on board the train when it leaves the station going your way. It looks like there's resistance at 12. What I would suggest, John, is placing a buy stop. Tell your Schwab broker if it trades at or through 12, then you want to buy it. Let's say it trades at or through 12, and you get filled at a bad fill, 12.50 or something, goes back to 40 grand. You make a little less than 30, but in the meantime, you still have your $10,000 earning you interest. Now, if it never trades at or through 12, it never becomes a live order, never gets triggered, never becomes activated. He goes, wow, can I do that? I go, yeah, get out your mouse and put in buy stop, above the market. By the way, we're going to place it above the market, 12. Anyways, after he did that, the following trades then occurred. That's where we're heading with these kind of questions.
Mhm.
And the stock went from 10, 9, 8, 6, 3, 2, went bankrupt. He never bought the stock. That train left the station going the wrong way. We don't want to get on board that train. He said, man, Dean, that was so cool. You ever think about being a broker? I go, well, I don't know what you think I did with 30 years of my life, but yeah, John, you
Mhm.
need to get somebody to help you. You need some help. Now, whenever we have three of a thing, like we do here, stop orders are used to, I have it here on the slide as 1, 2, 3, but on your test, it would be A, B, C, and they'd say accept. Stop orders can be used for all the following reasons except A, stop losses. Absolutely. B, protect profits. Absolutely. C, establish stock positions. Absolutely. D, immediate execution, best available price. No, right? That's not what they're for. Now, when we hit these, very important, if the stock trades at or through, because that's where we're heading, we're going to look at a very sequence of trades. If the stock trades at or through, may not ever trade at or through, but if it does, then it either becomes a live market order or a live limit order, right? It may never become live. It's a suspended contingent order. The contingency may never happen. If the contingency
Mhm.
doesn't happen, never becomes live. So it either is going to be triggered into a market order, activated. Now we're looking at a market order, immediate execution, best available price, or you can turn it into a limit order where you say, Dean, if it trades at or through, then I want my price or better. Now, I would warn you that if you say, Dean, if it trades at or through, then I want my price or better, I'd say, well, now you're adding a second contingency. If we turn it into a market order, just one contingency, at or through, send me home. Now, if we say I want a limit order, now I'm saying at or through, send me home at my price or better. Now, again, the key point is the more contingency or qualifiers you add to an order, the less likely it is that order is going to get filled. So we put in our stop order. We're watching trades go by on CNBC. I can't tell you how many people, customers had watching the tape, and they call me and go, Dean, that's my trade. I go, that's not your trade. That's the trade that turned your suspended contingent order into a live order. That wasn't your trade. It's two separate events. The first event is this, then that. If it trades at or through, then market or limit order, then that. Know this, know that. This may never become a live order. So trigger and execution are two separate events. All right, let's look at a test question. An investor sells 100 ABC short at 33 and places a buy stop at 35. First thing we think is, wow, this is a smart bear. Don't be a dumb bear. If you come into my office and say, Dean, I want to lose so much money that you in advance can't tell me how much. I said, well, there's very few things you can do that does that. I said, if you sell stock you don't own, wow, in most businesses, selling things you don't own is called fraud, but not in our business. It's called selling short. You probably heard that saying, don't sell that person short. They
Right.
might surprise you, right? So here you call your broker. You say, Dean, I'd like to borrow 100 shares of ABC and sell it short. I say, let me call Stock Loan and see if we have a customer who has signed a loan consent form. A loan consent form is my customers who have ABC in their account who've said I can lend it to customers like you who wish to go short. So there is a locate requirement. Now, Daniel Dewey, legendary Wall Street speculator, said those that sell what isn't hisn must eventually buy it back or go to prison. Right? So you're going to have an obligation to give back the borrowed stock. Now, what you're hoping to do is sell high and buy low. Right? You're hoping that stock goes down. But if you're wrong, there's a finite supply, potential infinite demand, and this thing could go up how far? So, very, very important arrow in our quiver for risk mitigation. I say, how much are you willing to lose in this short position? You say, Dean, approximately $200. The reason I keep saying approximately, because remember, if it's a market order, immediate execution, we don't know what that next price is going to be, but that's going to be your price. Please note, very testable where we place orders in relationship to the current market price, and we place buy stops above the current market price. It's important to know where we place orders in relationship to the current market price. Here we go with the test question. An investor sells short 100 ABC short at 33, places a buy stop at 35. The following trades then occur. The following trades then occur. So please note we did indeed follow the convention. What I mean by following the convention is we placed our buy stop above the current market price. We placed our buy stop above the current market price. Anything happen at 34.75? No. We're watching CNBC. We're watching the trades go by. Nothing happens. 34.90, anything happen? No. We're looking at a trade at or through 35. 34.80, nothing happens. Now, on your exam, there's not going to be an arrow that says triggered or elected. So, two separate events. Be careful what you're being asked on the test. RTFQ, read the full question. Am I asking you where did the order get triggered or elected? Then you'd say 35. Different question. What was the execution? Well, it doesn't matter what this next trade is. This could be 36. It could be 34. It doesn't matter. Because remember, now it is a market order and we want immediate execution at the best available price. Because now when we pull the trigger, it becomes a market order. So if we're trying to stop a loss in a short position, we can put in a buy stop. We also might want to stop a loss, stop the bleeding on a stock that we own. So here's another example of a test question. An investor buys 100 shares at 33. I say, Roxana, how much are you willing to lose? You say, why do you sound negative vibes like that? I go, well, it'd probably be a good idea to have a game plan and decide at what point it's a weed and not a flower, and we're going to pull it.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, Dean, let's put a sell stop at 30. I'm willing to lose approximately $300. The reason we say approximately because we don't know what that next trade is going to be once it becomes live. Could be a gap in the market. Who knows, what that trade is. My crystal ball is broke, right? So please note, very testable. Where do we place it in relationship to the current market price? Sell stops are always placed below the current market value. Please note, we followed the convention. We bought the stock at 33. Sometimes, uh, yeah, I haven't had my coffee and my brain is not kind of fired up. And I had already in my mind determined the profit I was going to make on the stock. So I had bought the stock, and then I tried to place a sell stop at like 78 to protect a profit that ain't there anyway. And when I called in the order, this is the days when you called in orders 30 years ago. And it was I called the order desk and they said, Dean, have you had your coffee? Why? And they go, you realize that you're trying to put a sell stop at 38 when the stock's at 40. They know my trading style. They go, you a little bit of hubris, Dean. You're already trying to lock in a non-existent profit that isn't there. I go, oh, yeah, you're right. Got me. So, you can't put that above. It's got to be below. Very much a test search scenario. The following trades then occur, right? So now we're watching CNBC. We're watching the trades go by. In the old days, you didn't get your own quotes. We used to have people who would come into the office and we'd have a ticker very much like the ticker you see in the back of my studio here. My brother came in to see my ticker and he thought it cost a fortune because when we were in the business, you had to pay huge amounts of money to get quotes. I mean, thousands of dollars. And so he was shocked. He goes, how much does that cost you? I go, it's free. You get quotes free. I go, the world we live in now, lots of stuff is free. But anyway, some people would come in the office and we call them lobby lizards. And what they would do is they hang out in the lobby and watch the tape go by. I would think there's better things to do with life, but some people like to watch tickers and things go by. Anyways, here if we're watching the CNBC still runs that tape, that ticker on the bottom. And we're watching the ticker and we see 30.75, nothing happens. 30.25, nothing happens. By the way, remember one potential answer is this never becomes a live order.
Okay.
30.01. Now, I like this one here because on a number line, there's no way to go from 30.01 to 29.99. So here's an example where it didn't trade at, it traded through. Once it trades at or through two separate events, be careful what you're being asked. It is now a live market order. Immediate execution at the best available price. Right? So they all trading pending news announcement. That's your trade. Good news or bad news, that's your trade. So we don't need to overthink this on the test. Whatever is the next number in the sequence, that is the execution. Now, outside of your testing fantasy land, in the real world, there might be people ahead of you, but on the test, it's the next trade. I joke. At least when you pass your exams, you get to leave the testing fantasy land. I'm stuck here permanently. No wonder I'm demented, right? So there are some things on your test that perhaps might be a little different in the real world. Now, if you want to be foolish, the reason I'm saying you're going to be foolish here is because now you say, Dean, if we pull the trigger, I want my price or better. And now we're going to have to be a little more careful on that trade when it gets triggered because that may or may not be acceptable. So we got to be a little more careful if it's a stop limit. So now it becomes a live limit order. So now my customer has said, Dean, if the stock trades at or through 25, then I want to buy it for 26 or less. I go, oh my good, you're too clever by half. Yeah, I'm saying, okay, so now you want two contingencies or qualifiers. The more contingencies or qualifiers you add, the less likely the order is going to get activated. All right. So here, please note, whether you want a buy stop that turns into a market order or a buy stop that turns into a limit order, all buy stops must be placed above the current market price. Please note we followed the convention here. Our buy stop is at 25, the stock is at 24. So whether you want a buy stop that turns into a market order or a buy stop that turns into a limit order, it's going to be above the market. The following trades then occur. So we're looking for a trade at or through 25. Boom. Nothing happens. Now we got to be careful because if it gets triggered or elected, it may not get triggered or elected. If know this, then know that. Right? 2480. Ding, 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 ding. Now we have a live limit order. Now we got to be careful. This may or may not be acceptable to the customer, this next trade. It's only going to be acceptable if it's 26 or less. So here we got to be a little more careful when going through the sequence, whether it's turning into a market order. If it's market order, poof, done. But if it's a limit order, if this next trade, for example, is 2601, 2602, 2603, no execution. If it goes 2601, 2602, 2603, 26, ding, 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 that would be acceptable and that would be the customer's trade.
Mm-hmm.
So you just got to be a little more careful. Let's try another one. So do you want a buy stop that turns into a market order or a buy stop that turns into a limit order? Do you want a sell stop that turns into a market order or a sell stop that turns into a limit order? Again, we have to be a little more careful when we have the limit. If we pull the trigger, if the order is elected and it's a limit order, we got to be a little more careful about that sequence because some of the trades in the sequence might be acceptable. They may not be acceptable based on this, right? So here,
Mm-hmm.
an investor wants to sell the stock, it falls to 25, but he wants at least $24. His seller, his price or more. Please note, whether you want a sell stop that turns into a market order or a sell stop that turns into a limit order, it's got to be placed below the market. And so the following trades then occur. So now we're looking for a trade at or through 25. Then we're looking for a trade that is 24 or better. Nothing happens. Nothing happens. Nothing happens. Ding, 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 ding. Now, the test, there won't be a little arrow telling you that that's where it got triggered or elected. That's what you've got to bring to the table, right? You now tell me on the test that this is no longer a contingent order. The contingency, the qualifier has been met, and this is now a live limit order. And so now what we're done, we can get rid of this. We're done with that part of it. So now we simply are looking to see if this is going to be acceptable. If that next trade is 23.99, 23.98, 23.97, no execution. If the next trade is 23.98, 23.97, 24, ding, ding, ding,
Okay.
then we get execution, right? Now we have a memory aid device for where we place orders in relationship to the current market price. This is a very important memory aid to help us remember where we place orders in relationship to the current market price. And it's slobs over bliss. That stands SL, sell limits. The O is just to turn it into a memory aid device. Now, I'm kind of lazy, so I don't remember slobs. I just remember bliss. And if it isn't a part of bliss, then it goes on the other side is how I do it. But now be careful here, whether you want a buy stop that turns into a market order or a buy stop that turns into a limit order, that's above the market. And BLS, buy limits, and sell stops, whether you want a sell stop that turns into a market order or a sell stop that turns into a limit order, that goes below the market. Do you remember what happens to stock prices, current market price, when the stock goes X? Do you remember what happens?
They become market order.
Well, when the stock goes X, it's going to go down.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Bank of America pays a 21-cent dividend. And you wouldn't want your order below the market for Bank of America to be accidentally triggered as a result of the dividend. So, right now, Bank of America is a $44 stock, and you have a buy limit at 43.95. And so what we're going to do is we're going to adjust orders below the market for the dividends because we want this to go down by that amount. So I wouldn't worry about doing the math. There's no math here on the test, but 43.95 minus 21 cents is 43.74. I'm going to change this because I say, hey, you don't want that to get triggered as a result of Bank of America's quarterly dividend, right? Bank of America pays a 21-cent quarterly dividend. We don't have to adjust the orders above the market because there's no way a Bank of America order above the market it's going to get triggered as a result of the stock going down on the X date.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why that bliss is also helpful because we might get a question about orders adjusted for cash dividends. And we would say the orders below the market would be adjusted for the cash dividends. It's recognition, not practical application.
Mm-hmm.
That we're going to adjust this accordingly, whatever that move is, so it doesn't get triggered. Now, in my case, I may not want you to do that as a customer because it's harder for me to remember the number anyways. So a customer might tell us on his orders DNR. That does not stand for do not resuscitate. That stands for do not reduce. So I tell my broker, I say, Roxana, on my buy limit on Bank of America 43.95, do not adjust that for the dividends.
Mm-hmm.
It's triggered, oh well. I don't want to deal with having this number change on me. Right now I know it's at 43.95. So very testable where we place orders in relationship to the current market price. Slobs over bliss is very helpful at. Time qualifiers. All orders are considered day orders unless you tell me differently. I had a customer on a Monday and he said, "Ding, let's put in a buy limit 1,000 at 18." And by the way, he doesn't have to say limit. He says buy 1,018. It's my job to know that's a limit order. And it didn't go off. Remember, it's below 18, and so it's below the market. He didn't get executed. I called him Tuesday morning. I said, "Hey, you want to re-enter the order?" Yeah, he said, "Let's do it." Called him Wednesday. When I called him Thursday, he said, "Dean, are you literally going to call me every day and ask me to re-enter that order?" I said, "I am." I said, "If you don't want me to do that, why don't we just change it till GTC? If we change the time qualifier from day order to good till cancel, I won't bother you anymore. And if we get your price or better, I'll give you a call and give you the report." And so GTC remains open unless properly renewed. Now, we have participants on the New York Stock Exchange, and one of the participants we have on the New York Stock Exchange is called a designated market maker, formerly known as the specialist. And what the New York Stock Exchange is doing, so we have two major market centers. This is very testable. One of our major market centers is New York, and it's an auction order driven market. They're matching buyers with sellers. In 1792, there were no electronics, there were no telephones. And if I'm talking to George Washington there in Tidewater, Virginia, and he wants to turn his Bank of New York stock back into money, I say, "George, everybody here in Tidewater, Virginia is like you. They're real estate rich and cash poor. I haven't been able to find you a local buyer. Are you, George, familiar with one of the most successful cartels ever created, the New York Stock Exchange?" He said, "Well, Dean, I am. I was inaugurated on the front steps." I said, "Well, as you know, George, they conduct an auction, test question, an auction every day between 9:30 and 4 o'clock, and they match buyers with sellers." It makes a lot of sense in 1792 because there's no telephones, no electronics. I say, "George, unfortunately, I'm not a member of that cartel. So we're going to have to go through one of the members, and they're going to charge us a commission for taking your order into the auction." Apocryphal, but, a guy says, "Hey, you know what, guys?" Guys, unfortunately, we didn't get our first lady member until the 70s, right? I mean, I just, we did it for our last book club meeting. We did She Wolves. And it's about the legendary ladies in the securities industry. And Muriel Seibert was the first lady to get a membership on the New York Stock Exchange. And she was telling her stories. You're like, "Oh my God," you don't realize it wasn't that long ago, actually. Anyways, in 72, oh guys, I say, "Hey guys, I've decided I'm going to be here every day at my post, and you can leave your limit orders with me. If you have a customer who wants to buy or sell Bank of New York at their price or better, leave the order with me. And if I can get your customer his price or better, I'll do so. That will free you up to go do other things." And they go, "Oh, that sounds like a pretty good idea." So that specialist is charged with maintaining a fair and orderly market. That means conducting a fair and orderly auction. It's a double auction. We got both buyers and we got sellers. And when you leave your order with me at GTC, I want to clean up my books, right? So as the designated market maker, AKA a specialist, unless it's properly renewed, I'm going to cancel in April and October so I can clean up the order book, right? So buy
Mhm.
300 shares at 30, a day order, all orders are considered day orders. GTC, any on execution portion will remain working from one day to the next until the order is canceled. And then the last trading day or last trading day in October is when we're going to cancel those. I wouldn't worry about that as a test question. I would just know they need to be properly renewed. Other qualifiers. Other qualifiers. I had a client of mine who wanted to do a very stupid thing. He wanted to buy 100 contracts of this option, and it literally had like a few days to expiration. And he said, Dean, what will you do this trade for me? And I said, well, John, my ticket charge, boy, how the world has changed, right? I'm amazed that Robinhood can trade for free. And my day to just run a ticket, it cost me $50. And I said, John, since this is foolish, I'm just going to cover my own cost on the trade. And when my own cost, hard cost to run that trade is $50. So I'll do it for $50. Anyways, I got a report that he got 10 contracts. And I called him. I said, John, as I told you, my hard cost is $50, but I think these guys are going to be doling these out to us. And I would like your permission to change the remaining 90 to 90 contracts, fill or kill. Either give us the 90 contracts right now or kill. He goes, well, Dean, that sounds kind of harsh. Are there other qualifiers? I go, oh my goodness. Whenever customers find out there's qualifiers, I say, okay, well, yeah, John, there are other qualifiers we can add to the order. We could say 90 contracts, immediate or cancel. Like fill or kill, we want it now, but we will accept partial execution. He said, well, no, I'd still like to get them all. I said, okay, well, let's make it 90 contracts, all or none. Like fill or kill, we want it all, but we're willing to wait. I always joke when I was chaperoning the boys basketball team, high school, I'd pull into McDonald's up. I say 10 max, 10 fries, 10 shakes, fill or kill. That means if they don't have 10 max, 10 fries, 10 shakes ready to go, I'm out of here. Off to Burger King we go. If I say 10 max, 10 fries, 10 shakes, immediate cancel, they say, Dean, here's three fries, five max, and six shakes. If I say 10 max, 10 fries, 10 shakes, I'm going to pull my van in the back, but don't be giving me two max, a fry, a shake, two more max, three more fries. No, I want it one fill. I told you, predate Uber and Lyft. And, in those days, when I would be going to the game, I would take a limo. And I tell you, limo drivers are reliable until they're not. Anyways, this guy said, listen, I need you back here at 10 o'clock. That's when the game's over. We're off to our next venue. But, if you want to troll around and, take a fare to the airport, whatever, just get your butt back here by 10. 10:30, my phone rings and he says, hey, Dean, I took an airport fare. I'll be there at 11:30. I go, whoa, fill or kill? I don't need a limo at 11:30. I'll just take a cab. Anyways, I said fill or kill. The owner called me. Are you trying to kill my driver? I go, no, 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 not kill the driver. Just kill the order. I don't need it. Now, we said to our participants on the New York Stock Exchange, we have discussed one of the participants in this auction who's charged with maintaining a fair and orderly market, and that was the specialist, the designated market maker. Another participant is a floor broker. If I tell you I'm the floor broker for Edward Jones or Raymond James, I'm the one who's responsible for executing orders for clients of member firms. That's what I do as a floor broker. Now, depending on who your floor broker is, will depend on whether this is a good idea or not. You say, Dean, I want to buy 10,000 shares GE, market not held. Market not held, 10,000 shares GE. So now my floor broker, nobody knows he has the order. Bam. He does it whatever time and price he thinks looks good. Now, depending on who that is, will depend on whether it's a good idea or not. Couple test questions here. One is who has the market not held order? A, the designated market maker, aka specialist, and The floor broker, ding, 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 ding. That's the person who has it. Second test question, does it require a discretionary account for a customer to place a market not held order? Does it require a discretionary account, discretionary authority for the floor broker of Edward Jones to accept this order? And the answer is no. As long as the three A's are present, very testable. As long as the three A's are present, there is no discretionary authority necessary. The three A's are action. Please note, in my example, I told him to buy. As long as the three A's are present, it does not require discretionary authority. Action amount. I told him 10,000 shares, quantity. And I told him the asset, GE. As long as the three A's are present, that does not require discretionary authority. We do not need discretionary authority to make decisions about time and price. Time and price is about getting good execution.
Mhm.
So very tested to know what constitutes discretion, what does not constitute discretionary authority, and time and price does not require discretionary authority. So that's the second test question about this scenario. Not held order does not require the client to have a discretionary account because we only need discretionary authority as a broker if I'm making a decision about one, two, or all three of the A's. Action, asset, amount. If I'm making a decision about that, then I need to have discretionary authority, right? So,
Mhm.
all right. So let's check in on the auction right now. So you say, Dean, what's going on in the auction in XYZ? The quotes that you see on the New York Stock Exchange come from the limit orders that the designated market maker is holding. It's attestable to be able to contrast the auction order driven market with the over the counter markets like NASDAQ, where the quotes are market makers who are willing to buy and sell securities into their inventory. So we are not looking at a quote here from a market maker. We're looking at a quote from the auction. I told you it drives me nuts. Uh, I love eBay. eBay is a secondary market. And
Mhm.
the reason I love eBay is because there's things that are no longer available to me in the primary market. My family makes fun of me, but I got a bag fetish. I don't travel the world like I used to, but my best bag that's been all around the world with me is a North Face Caleo 3700. And, they don't make them anymore. And every time I see one on eBay, I'm a buyer. I'm going to corner the market. And I always, drives me nuts that it's single-sided auction. It's just sellers, no buyers. I would like to be able to put in a bid, say, hey, if you got a North Face Galeo 3700, I have a Toomey phone pouch, and I just recently got a new phone. I said, okay, time to get my new Toomey phone pouch, and they don't make them anymore. So here I come to eBay again, right? Looking for a secondary transaction. Would it be fun if I could just put my bid in there and then we could see the spread, right? Anyways, that's eBay. Here in the auction, we have both buyers and sellers. I say, Roxana, right now in the auction for XYZ, there's somebody who's willing to buy 500 shares at 29.91. And there's somebody who's willing to sell 200 shares at 30. So are you a buyer or a seller? You say, Dean, I'm a buyer. I said, well, then we're going to have to match you with a seller. And right
Mhm.
now, there's somebody who's willing to sell 200 shares at 30. I think of the difference kind of like the art market. In the art market, secondary market for art, there are auction houses, Sotheby's and Christie's, for example, and they don't have art in inventory. They simply match buyers with sellers and they take commission. And then
Mhm.
there's art dealers, who have art in inventory. And
Yeah.
that's a little different transaction. So I'm not saying there's no shenanigans at auction houses, but there's less shenanigans, right? Because I mean, their auction depends on people, feeling good about it. David Rubenstein is a billionaire founder at Carlyle, and he's into historical documents. And I was asking him about, attending the Sotheby's auction. I said, "How did it happen?" He goes, "Dean, they saw that I bought a copy of the Magna Carta, and then they invited me to the next auction."
Mhm.
And, they assigned me a rep who has a PhD in historical documents and would give me any information I want to know for free for the idea that I might buy something. And then they would get a commish, and, oh, well. Okay, so you want to give me one of these qualifiers. So based on the auction right now, you say, Dean, I want to buy 300 shares at 30. Fill or kill? I go, well, I'm sorry, it's a kill. There's only 200 shares available at 30. As a buyer, I'm matching you with a seller, right? So, maybe, it's one of the things that I don't know, makes you feel good or makes you feel bad, whatever the case is. But people sometimes get hung up on this, quite a bit. This business asked. Is the buy limits that whoop, the buy limits that the specialist that does a market makers holding. As I told you, there's a buyer here, 500 shares at 29.91. Remember, you're buying, so we got to match you with a seller, right? And so you're going to be over on this side. And I say, sorry, you want to buy 200, but there's only what? 300, there's only two, so it's a kill.
Mm-hmm.
Kill, right? Now, by the way, we might be pleasantly surprised. On NASDAQ, over the counter markets, you are never going to be pleasantly surprised about execution. But maybe you put in this fill or kill 300 shares at 30, and I call you and I say, you bought 300 at 29.99. You go, what the hell happened? I go, the specialist stepped ahead. The specialist filled you himself at 29.99.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime the specialist wants right now, he could buy the stock into his own inventory at 29.92, and he could sell it out of his inventory at 29.99. By the way, if the person at 30 bitches, he says, well, listen, I was willing to sell it for less than you. So, I'm allowed to step ahead as long as I'm giving people a better price because that narrows the spread. That's called price improvement on the New York Stock Exchange. But he doesn't have to do that. What he couldn't do right now is buy it at 29.90 or sell it at 30.01. That would be no good, right? By the way, this is called the inside quote. And on the New York, as we said, this is determined by the order. That's the highest bid, and that is the lowest ask. Right. So you want to, right now, if you gave me a sell, you say, Dean, I want to sell 300 shares at 30.01. I say, well, right now your order is not competitive
Mm-hmm.
because there's somebody who's willing to sell at 30. So, you say, Dean, buy 300 at 30, immediate or cancel. I say, well, okay, you got 200, right? Because immediate or cancel, you like fill or kill, you want it now, but you're willing to accept partial execution. You say, Dean, buy 300 shares all or none. What's going on? I said, well, if another 100 shares shows up at 30, we'll fill you. But right now, there's only 200 shares there. And so the order is still working. Now, by the way, working as GTC. Remember, if it's a day order, if you don't tell me GTC, nothing happens today. Well, then that's the end of it. Now, we said on the New York Stock Exchange, quotations are set by the limit orders. But in the over the counter markets, test question, over the counter markets can best be characterized as negotiated quote driven markets. So now we're not looking at quotes that have been determined by the orders, the limit orders. We're going to be looking at market makers who trade from inventory, right? I had a guy, this was an art piece in Newport Beach in the gallery, and it kind of spoke to me. It was a surreal piece of art. And I said, how much for that? And he says, well, Dean, if you have to ask, you can't afford it. I said, well, I don't know where we go from here. I mean, I'm not going to give you a market order to buy a piece of art where I have no idea what that price is. I said, listen, I think that's how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to give me a quote, and that's how we begin negotiations. I don't know how we begin negotiations if you don't come up with a quote. I was going to see a friend of a friend. My friend is a very wealthy guy, and he was in San Francisco. He says, Dean, I'm at a friend's house of mine, and I want to see if you want to come have a no beverage. I go, sign me up. I'm on my way. I walk in this guy's house, the friend of the friend, not my friend. And I said, man, this is beautiful. I mean, this is gorgeous. I said, he goes, well, Dean, I'm an art dealer. Do you know what that means? I said, well, I think I do. I think you're telling me the stuff that I'm looking at is for sale. This is inventory on your walls. He goes, well, yeah. You see anything you like? I go, yeah, that really speaks to me. Now, how much for that? He said, $2,000. I go, great. I'm an OG. I carry cash. So I whipped out $2,100 bills and I guess I'm pretty crass because I lifted it off his. He goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Put it in my trunk. I don't want to forget that, I bought this painting. I got to go, I'll come back. We'll have some cocktails, right?" And anyways, the next day I got an email from him. He goes, "Dean, you do what you think is fair, but I think that $2,000 was a little too low." I said, "Well, what I think is fair is I keep the painting and you keep the money. Listen, I don't know what to tell you. I'm a broker. That trade is settled, my friend."
Mhm.
And he goes, "Well, what if it was your house?" I go, "Well, I don't tell people that I'm an art dealer, and I don't tell people the things on the wall for sale. And if somebody wanted to buy something from me, I'd make that price so high that in the morning I'd wake up and say, 'What a dummy.' I said, 'I'll tell you what, I'll bust the trade. I'll bring you back the art and you give me back my money, but I'm not going to renege after we've already agreed to terms.'" I think he thought I'd be embarrassed enough if with my other friend that, I don't, I felt like telling him, "No, my other friend's not going to be surprised that I'm going to keep the painting, right?" So
Mhm.
I'm going to give you a bid and an ask, a price at which I'm willing to buy that into my inventory and a price at which I'm willing to sell it out of my inventory. Spread always means difference. The spread. What's the spread on the game tonight? Now, what's the spread between the pop and the NAV? It always means the difference. So the
Mhm.
spread is the difference between the bid and the ask, and that's how we make money as market makers. We make money by buying at the bid and selling it as, and making that round trip as quick as possible. All quotes are considered firm for at least 100 shares. So if I'm a market maker and you call me and you say, "Dean, what's your quote?" I say, "My quote is 15, 16, 10 by 10. That means I'm willing to buy 10 round lots into my inventory at 10. I'm willing to sell 10 round lots out of my inventory at 16. That's called my size of my quote. The minimum size is going to be 1 by 1. 100 shares either side. I got to have a two-sided quote. I joke outside of the test, if you wouldn't do more than 100 shares, we'd say, "Come on, are you a market maker or a mouse?"
Mhm.
Market makers provide liquidity, right? That's what they do for a living, right? I think a good example here is a car dealer, right? I provide liquidity in cars. I turn cars into money and money into cars.
Mhm.
The difference is my spread, right? I don't think that car dealers have a 5% policy like we do in the securities industry. Uh, You know, I think their spreads or whatever, the market will bear would be the spread, I would think. Anyways, here, you say, "Dean, we're buying a 10 round lots, 1,000 shares at 16. I go, I changed my mind. Very testable. They'll say on your exam, a market maker fails to honor a firm quote. This is a prohibited practice and is known as, and you got to come up with backing away. It's when a market maker fails to honor a firm quote. We said the minimum is one trading unit. That's called a round lot, right? It's 41, 41.25. That means I'm going to buy it at 41, sell it at 41.25. We can do it at 41, 40, 41, 40.25. Those are my quote, right? Whenever a
Mhm.
customer is looking at two prices, the customer always pays the high price,
Mhm.
always receives the low price. What's that called? The securities industry, right? I joke if I go to the Lincoln dealer, I say, "How much for a Lincoln Navigator?" He goes, 90 grand. I go, "Great, I've got one. Where's my 90 grand?" He goes, "Dean, I'm sorry. I misunderstood you. I thought you wanted to turn money into a navigator. I gave you my ask offer price. Now
Mhm.
I understand that you want to trade in the navigator. You want to turn the navigator into money, 50 grand." I go, "Oh my God, what's that called?" He says, "Dean, that's called the spread." I got good news. If you don't like me, there's other Lincoln Navigator dealers, and maybe they'll give you a better price, right? Subject means subject to confirmation. So, subject means, yeah, I don't like the last time I looked, or we probably do it. Here I I'm coming back from lunch. I think you say, "Then we'll get your butt in your chair and give me a quote." Now, nominal quotes test question are for informational purposes only. So you say, "Hey, Dean, I would like to get a quote on my muni bonds. I'm updating my statement at my bank, and they've asked me for an updated, account statement." I
Mhm.
say, "Roxanne, not a problem. Let me give you some nominal quotes." So I start going through your muni bonds. You say, "Really? So?" I go, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. I thought I was telling you that, those are for informational purposes. My favorite version of this was the apprentice was hired. The guy works, he is a portfolio manager for a muni bond mutual fund. And the guy's his apprentice. And he says, listen, I'm going to be on the office, out of office Friday. As you know from studying, the guy's studying to take his test, the apprentice, he says, we have to get NAV once per business day. So after market close, I'd like you to call the bond desk and get some quotes. And I'm going to get some quotes. Can you do that? He goes, absolutely. And he says, okay. So the apprentice calls the bond desk and he says, I'd like to get some quotes for our portfolio so we can calculate NAV. And then the bond desk says, okay, let me give you some nominal quotes. He goes, no, 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 no. I've been studying and I know that nominal quotes are for informational purposes only. And we have to be able to meet redemption requests. And so I would like a firm quote. The
Unquote.
bond desk says, are you clear? You know what you're asking. You're now asking me to go through this entire portfolio that I originally sold to you and give you a price at which right now I'm willing to put all these bonds back into my inventory. You're sure you understand what you're asking? And the princess said, yep, I get it. All right, here we go. You can imagine how this is going to be a really bad event because now the NAV goes down 30%, the difference between nominal and firm. And now the NAV goes down 30, people start redeeming, and now you got to sell the bonds. And I was thinking about the guy who told the apprentice to do this, like, oh, what? So, oh well. The test question is to know when somebody's giving you a nominal quote. Customers get confused, and we tell you on your statements, right? All these quotes are nominal; they're for informational purposes only. All right. Well, our hour is up, Roxana. Thank you so much for giving us
No, thank you so much, Dean.
share your
Appreciate
session with
you.
other folks, and we'll do an
Yes.
SIE practice exam tomorrow evening. Try and avoid as many energy vampires as you possibly can, because we want to make sure that